2 chapters today, and that would be The Forest again and King's Cross. And here we are, the end of all things. Or at least that's really what Harry's facing down. Because in this moment, he has to walk away. Or, if you prefer, walk towards. Because that's sort of what we are seeing here, is this need to go on anyways. And do what needs to be done. And even if that's dying. And this part gets me every time, so don't be surprised if I burst into tears in the middle of this video. We're at tea on the sidelines, just waiting for me. But I open at the close, which is sort of the alternate title this video could have. Has always been when my heart just breaks. Because in that moment, when everything is just sort of gone, Harry starts to realize the more important things to him. And some of that is things he hadn't even considered before, which is feeling alive and recognizing that this is weird and different and unique and impossible, and yet here we are, and he's feeling his heart beating, and he's feeling himself breathing, and he's wondering to himself why this has never been something he's felt before. And it is because he's standing sort of on this threshold of losing it all. Because you don't recognize what you have just here and what's functioning here until there's a strong chance you're no longer going to have it. You can recognize all of this other stuff, and more closely you're more likely to recognize, of course, other people. You're going to recognize your family and your friends. But even that's going to be taken for granted until there's a possibility that it's done. And in this moment, Harry's just feeling himself. Well, he's not, like, he's feeling himself breathing and his heart beating, and that means something to him. But again, it's something he needs to overcome. He needs to feel his own heartbeat and say, this is gonna stop. But that's okay, because it stops for everything. And maybe this is the most important thing it could stop for. And that is everything else he's seeing as he's leaving the castle before he hits the forest. Everything he's seeing is why it has to stop. And he has to use that to fortify himself and make it important. And he does. One of the things I find interesting here is the last thing he thinks about as Voldemort's cursing him is Ginny. It's his version of Fred laughing as he dies. It is this moment of, you can take my life, but you cannot take what is inside of me, and I choose to focus on the positives, which is the girl that he loves. But on his way out, he speaks to one person and one person alone, and that is Neville. Which I think is a bit of a surprise for all of us, and you can logic it out again, he does, with, I need to make sure there's a backup. If something happens to Ron and Hermione, somebody needs to know that the snake needs to be destroyed. But it's also, again, these two hearts connecting in this moment. Because Neville could have been the other boy who lived. And Voldemort killing Harry's parents set him up to battle down Voldemort. But Bellatrix torturing Neville's parents to insanity set him up to lead the army. And so it's these two boys who have had to grow up far too quickly, who have gone through all these terrible things, having this moment where they're looking at each other saying, okay, and we're gonna finish this. We finish it now. We finish it here. And that is a critical recognition of Harry in that moment, because he doesn't speak to Ginny and he doesn't speak to Ron and Hermione. He speaks to Neville on the level of emotions need to get set aside. We will speak as brothers, yes, but we will speak as brothers who have a job to do. And then they keep going, which I think says a lot for Neville, that Neville trusts Harry implicitly, because I think he probably sees through that lie when he says, like, you're not gonna go this alone, and Harry says no. I think Neville's not stupid, but he trusts Harry to do what he has to do, just as Neville will do what he has to do. I don't think anybody else would have just walked away from Harry at that point. But Neville knows he has to, just as Harry knows he has to walk into that forest. It is this moment where these two are looking at each other as equals in a war they never should have had to fight. And as deciding factors in it. Like, okay, we end this now. And I will see you on the other side. And that's that recognition when they walk away from each other, is that they will meet again at some point. And then Harry walks into the woods, and I open at the close, like I said, is the part that always wounds me deeply, but makes me have hope for the afterlife. There I go. Still a little too warm. I knew it was coming. Because, like I said a couple videos ago, like, I don't want to die screaming. But the setup here with Harry and the Four Spirits, sort of, it's a comforting factor that we can move forward into this unknown and not be afraid necessarily, and not be alone in doing it. Because these four show up and they look younger, like Sirius and Remus look younger, and Harry has this moment, which is an odd moment if he honestly thinks he's going to die, where he says it right then and there of, I never wanted any of you to die for me, and looks at Remus and apologizes because he just had a son. And Remus's response is critical, which is he will live knowing I died to make him a better world, which is also, again, the thing that Harry had to realize with his own parents, was they didn't want to go and they didn't want to leave him. But there are things worth fighting for, and making a better world for your kids is probably a crucial one. And I think in this moment, before we descend or ascend, whichever you prefer, into King's Cross, I would like to take a step back and return to the beginning, because that seems to be a big thing, and we're going to see this all throughout King's Cross, is here at the end of all things is the beginning. It is a cycle, and it is Luna's cycle of a circle has no start. It is the phoenix and the flame at its quintessential core. Dumbledore and Harry are going to sit down and they're going to talk about Harry's beginning and Dumbledore's beginning, and honestly share stories with each other, which is just again, after all the walking Harry's been doing this entire book, to have this moment where he sits and they just talk. And he asks questions and he explains things just as much as Dumbledore does. Like, it's not a one-sided conversation. It should point us back to the beginning as well. And we get a clue of that way back before any of this. Way back when they're actually going to go find Voldemort and Snape, where Ron says that he wished Crookshanks was there so they could get into the Whomping Willow, and Hermione says, "Are you a wizard or not?" Which is a callback to the Philosopher's Stone and their adventure going in to get the Philosopher's Stone, where Hermione freaks out about not having sunlight, and Ron's response is, "Are you a witch or not?" There are little moments through this entirety, like Ron and Harry speaking, like the kid asking for her mother. These are all moments that are callbacks to the beginning, where we should recognize that, like the phoenix and the flame, there is no end and beginning. It is a cycle. Because we have something I noticed at the beginning returning here, which is the Socratic ness of Harry. I mentioned at the beginning where Harry is talking with Hagrid that he has a very Socratic method, like he asks questions, he's gaining information that way. And then we have here in this moment of self-sacrifice a Socratic death for something that is worth more. And it's a question of what that is. Because for Socrates, he was charged with corrupting the youth and not celebrating the city's gods. So the corrupting of the youth was the big one. Because he had this philosophy style. He was the gadfly of Athens. And he was actually sentenced to death by hemlock poisoning. And he could have gotten out of it. He could have actually fled. He had people who set up an escape plan for him and showed up at the jail and said, "Okay, we can go." And Socrates' response is no. He actually stays and reflects on both philosophy and poetry at the very end. And then willingly takes the hemlock and lays down and dies. And that, for me, is a belief in something at its core that needs to be defended unto death. Because fleeing in this moment would have said that that thing was not worth dying for. So why would it ever be worth living for? So Harry's choice here is the right one, I think. Which is facing down this recognition that magic is worth it for everybody. It's worth it for the Muggleborns and the Half-Bloods and the Purebloods. But to walk away as a Half-Blood or to encourage all the Muggleborns to flee, is to deny magic's worth in that, and deny philosophy's worth, and the worth of poetry, and the worth of reason, and the worth of Hogwarts at its core. Because Socrates also stays because Athens is worth it, and Athens needs it. Aristotle had no such qualms. He fled promptly when he was put on trial, saying that he would not let Athens sin against philosophy twice. But here in this moment, Harry is much more in the vein of Socrates, which is, I stay because this place and this thing are worth it, and I will not let you tell me otherwise. But I think it's also why he chooses to go back, because Socrates at his core, I think, knew that there were people who would come afterwards. That's why he kept having these conversations right up to his deathbed. Harry recognizes that it actually has to keep going, and he is a key part of keeping it going. That the sacrifice was necessary, but also his return is necessary. And this comes into the poetry, where the hero has to come back, or everything that was gained on that journey is lost, because Harry made that final trip on his own. So that information needs to be brought back in his words and in his actions. It can't be brought back as Voldemort is going to attempt to do in his way. Harry's got to bring that back, or that sacrifice will never be known. And that's sort of the thing with Socrates, is that sacrifice was very public. He does not take the hemlock on his own. He actually has a couple people who were there with him, and not just the executioner. It had to be publicly done. So Harry here needs to come back. He can't just walk away from King's Cross as much as maybe he wants to, and as he was ready to. That's why he had the Resurrection Stone, because he was ready to go on. And maybe that's what Master of Death really means. You're mastering yourself in the face of it, and recognizing when to embrace it, and when to run like hell from it. Or walk. Because Harry sort of, well, I wouldn't say he walks away, he gets carried off, and then sort of doesn't out of Hagrid's arms. So, when to roll away? But it is these moments where Harry has to make sacrifices in the face of all his choices, so that he could keep Hogwarts and the importance of magic for everyone going. I didn't cry as much. I appreciate that. Well, here at the end of all things, we sit and talk. We tell each other stories. Because that is what we are in the end. Thank you, Doctor Who, for that. One more chapter to go. Cheers.